I'm going to start, and I'm going to leave comments on today. Actually, we're going to try it this way and just see what happens, because it's just kind of nice to see everybody there. I think if you don't want to see so many comments, if you tap on the comments, then I think you can reduce the number that you see. So if they're slightly annoying you, then try that, and let's try all this and just see how it goes, shall we? So last week we did a slightly unusual Elevenses with Lynne, because we were talking about Art History Room 101, and I asked you what you would put in Art History 101, and then later on we had all sorts of ideas which we talked about, and then later on I popped on stories, all of these things that you've expelled to Room 101, and asked you, out of all of them, which is the one that you would most like to see locked away in the room of your worst fears. Which one is your worst fear? And it was pretty decisive. The results were pretty decisive. Most of you said that you would like pretentious, arty writing. So arty bollocks firmly goes into Room 101. Completely agree. Before we got to episode 101 and hence Art History Room 101, I was talking about an artist called Camembert who created, I don't actually even know if I've still got one up here, let's have a look. No, I don't still have the image there, never mind. Who created a portrait of Rudolph II, Habsburg Holy Roman Emperor, completely out of fruit. And he was referred to later on in the early 20th century, Camembert, the artist, was referred to later on in the early 20th century as the father of Surrealism. And it was a gentleman called Breton who coined this phrase. Now, Breton himself was actually the founder of the Surrealist movement. So it was, he wrote a manifesto. This was in 1924, and he was incredibly interested primarily in the subconscious. So Breton was a psychiatrist, and he was a writer. So initially, the Surrealist movement, as laid out in this manifesto, sort of concentrated more on writing, in particular automatic writing. That's what he was kind of really interested in. He thought you could really unleash the subconscious with automatic writing. And the visual arts were a little bit peripheral to all of this, because it was felt that actually the process was too long. The process of drawing, painting, sculpting was too protracted, and therefore couldn't be as spontaneous as was required. That, however, that mode of thinking, however, changed pretty quickly, because artists such as André Masson, even. That was a mixture between André Breton and André Masson or something, I don't know. Anyway, André Masson. Is this my subconscious working? Is it my subconscious? I don't know. He started doing or creating images like this. So this was like not automatic writing, but automatic drawing. And what did he call them? He called them just automatic drawing. I thought that was a fancy name, but no, there wasn't. So this was created in 1924. And so with this, Breton, not Masson, Breton, thought, okay, no, actually, we probably can include artists And so the group of people that were interested in Surrealism expanded, and pretty soon in the 1920s there were a bunch of artists that were meeting very regularly with Breton and Masson in Paris, and they were discussing Surrealist art. They weren't discussing, as you might think, artists. So you imagine artists meeting in a cafe, and and perhaps they're talking about philosophy, but they might also be talking about pigments or perspective, or something more traditional to do with art. No, these artists weren't even remotely interested in that. They actually spent most of their time experimenting with hypnosis and subconscious creation. So I bet it was quite fun in that back room of whichever cafe they used to meet in, to watch what they were all about. One of the artists that met with this initial group of surrealists within the Surrealist movement was a gentleman called Salvador Dali. And he did experiment also with automatic drawing, as Masson had, but he was better known for works like this. Here we go. So this is one of Dali's early works. So definitely not some kind of creation from the subconscious that was just laid out on the canvas just like that. Definitely this has been thought about, but it's more the associations. And I think what is so fascinating in terms of Dali's work is that he's painting something with real precision and real accuracy, and real the talent in his the formal talent that he's displaying is extraordinary, but he's creating something that couldn't possibly be. So it's like they're really vivid, but it's like their dreams, and I think that's exactly the point. So he's really vividly painting something that could be in a dream or in a hallucination, perhaps, something that you might come up with in your mind after you've just been hypnotized in the back room of a Parisian cafe. This is one of Dali's really early works. So this dates to 1931. At which point Dali was a member of the Surrealist movement. He had also, along with his wife, just been chucked out of not only his home by his father, but also completely excommunicated from his entire community. That's quite serious. So Spanish, Dali is Spanish, his family incredibly religious, and the reason that they expelled Dali was this, or that specifically his father expelled him, was this. This was a work that Dali exhibited in Paris in, I think, 1929. If you can read French, you'll get it straight away. So I think fairly evidently this is an outline of Jesus, the Sacred Heart, or his Sacred Heart, Jesus' Sacred Heart, I suppose, in the centre. But the words "Parfois je crache par plaisir sur le portrait de ma mère." Sometimes I spit with pleasure on the portrait of my mother. Not very kind, but his dad was absolutely outraged. That blasphemy wasn't going to, I was going to say wash, that might be a slightly unfortunate term, but that he wasn't having it, and so Dali and his wife Gala got excommunicated from Dali's family home and from his village, and went to live in Port Ligat, also in Spain, on the eastern coast, and that is where he painted this, the Persistence of Memory, which rather ironically I have actual trouble remembering the name of this artwork. I always want to call it the Pursuit of Memory, but it's not, it's the Persistence of Memory. It is, isn't it? Yes, the persistence. See, I had to check. I was worried. I was doubting myself. So anyway, so the setting for this is quite likely, actually, Port Ligat. Time, yeah, it's sort of all about time. Is it slightly nostalgic, perhaps? You know, is he slightly thinking about what was, what might be? Who knows? It's definitely, I think, pertaining to the, should we say, the malleability of time, you know, and how you perceive time, and how time in a dream or in reality or in a memory can be extremely, you know, they're all quite different, aren't they? You know, you're having fun, time flies, you're really, really bored, time drags like nothing else, or like time. So definitely about time. Dali said that actually this idea of the melting, or these very limpid clocks, came from watching Camembert melt out in the heat. Scholars have looked at this painting, and of course they have many things to say, but one of the things that they say is that actually, well, let's go really deep into this, because Einstein at this time was talking about his theory of relativity, and so therefore he was talking about how time was much more complex than we could ever possibly imagine, and this is what Dali is engaging with in this extraordinary work. So cheese or Einstein, you choose. Certainly, I think it's quite interesting that we say that these are melting clocks. Actually, if you look at them, they're not really clocks at all. They've all got a winding mechanism, and so they are some other timepieces, probably a reference to pocket watches. And the pocket watch was, I think, the fashionable accessory for the middle class gentleman. The type of person that the Surrealists absolutely loved, completely taking the mickey out of. So if you think about the idea that Einstein is saying that time is really, really complex, Dali is saying, yeah, these are just like melting cheeses. And so therefore the pocket watch in that case is kind of a little bit irrelevant. You know, if time is so complex, then a pocket watch isn't really going to cover it, is it? So I do think that there is some kind of slight jab at the well-to-do middle classes, perhaps in this, perhaps. I mean, who knows, really? Really, who knows what this jellyfish squid type thing is lying on the sand with a timepiece draped over it. It's been suggested that perhaps this is a portrait of Dali. Perhaps it is. I mean, are those eyelashes, and is that a sort of a squiggle over to the left hand side, is that a little squiggle of a moustache underneath what might be representative of eyelashes? Dali's very famous moustache, of course. Who knows? Is that a tongue kind of sliding out of a nose? It's not a mouth, is it? That's a nose. Who knows? Is this sort of embryonic, slightly unformed shape symbolic of Dali's still rather embryonic career, or his enforced new start, his enforced new life in Port Ligat? Who knows? Who knows? Dali wasn't really ever about to elaborate. What is more widely agreed on, however, is the fact that the ants crawling over this timepiece here are representative of decay. Dali used ants time and time again as a motif throughout his in his art throughout his life, and apparently he had seen ants devouring some entrails or something pretty nasty when he was a very little boy, and so to him they represented destruction and decay. So an interesting addition. He also referred to, going back to cheese, because we can't escape cheese in this when we're talking about this image. He also referred to time as the cheese of time. He referred to the cheese of time, or the Camembert, specifically the Camembert of time. That was Dali's phrase. So I think that overall we can say that this is an image that is about the curious nature of time and the perception of time, but perhaps more specifically, if it's actually about anything, it's about how the perception of time changes over time, and how memory fades. Time isn't, or the memories aren't fixed things. I think really, so the decay of memory with time is, I would say, probably what Dali was getting at, the Camembert of time. I don't think I can actually put it more eloquently than that. I mean, that's just marvellous, isn't it? So the Camembert of time, Dali's Camembert of time, actually his career definitely didn't decay or disintegrate over time. This was completed in 1931, at which point Dali was desperately poor. It was exhibited, this is 1931. It was exhibited several years later in 1934 in Connecticut, in America. Dali at that point didn't have enough money to travel with his wife to the States. So actually his friend Picasso helped him out, and by this time he'd actually been thrown out of the Surrealist movement because they didn't really like his politics. It was thought that Dali was a bit of a fascist sympathiser. At least he definitely didn't condemn Hitler with the vehemence that other members of the Surrealist movement did, and later on he also praised fascism in other ways. He praised Franco and so on. So he had interesting political views, shall we say, political views. So yeah, he'd been thrown out of the Surrealist movement. The work, though, was exhibited in the USA and became an absolute sensation. It was celebrated all over. It was this work that really made Dali incredibly famous. He would begin then a relationship with New York in particular. He used to go and stay in New York a lot over 40, 50 years. And of course, we all know his name. He became incredibly famous, an incredible showman. I think he absolutely loved the fame. So this painting, from very, very humble beginnings, completely changed Dali's life. The Surrealist movement kind of fell apart really during the Second World War. So there we go. So a little bit of surrealism. We might continue with some more surrealism. I don't know. I'm not actually. I'll stop sharing. I'm not actually going to be here next week. Away, but the week after, perhaps we'll. Actually, no. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow on with something. I know what I'm going to do. So You can wait and see, but thank you very much for joining me today. Nice to see some new faces. Have a great weekend. Have a great evening. A great Friday, even before the weekend. I will see you in 2 weeks' time. If you want to buy tickets to the my show at the Phoenix Art Club on the 13th of February at 2:00, then do so. Do so quite promptly, because I'm not. This isn't any kind of advertising fluff. It's actually really, really true that they are selling out quite quickly. So hopefully I'll see some of you there. Thanks for joining, and I will see you in a couple of weeks. Bye. Bye.